Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. We are so excited. We have New York Times best-selling author Michael Spradlin with his new book for middle grade readers. It's called The Enemy Above, a novel of World War II. Welcome back to Anderson's in Naperville. It's so great to have you here. Well, this is pretty exciting because this is launch day. Launch day.
Book birthday.
Book birthday, you call it. Yeah, it's the birthday. So I want to know, and because you've been published so many times, you've published across from picture books up to adult, and it's got to be over 20 books at this point now. And so this isn't your first rodeo, as we say. So what is it like? June 28th, the launch of The Enemy Above. How does it feel? Does it still feel as exciting as it was when your first book came out?
It really does, and I think in some ways it's more exciting. I think having more than 20 books, it's a testament that perhaps you have a little bit of talent, a little bit of ability to keep going. There are a lot of writers that they write a book or two and that's the end, and that's all I've ever wanted since I began, was for my books to do well enough that I could just keep writing because I love it so much. And so far it seems to have worked.
Yeah, I think so. And this book, I think kids are absolutely going to love this, because what I'm curious about is The Enemy Above, considering this as a middle grade, it's for that sweet spot, especially for boys, even though when I was a girl I would have loved books like this. But that sweet spot of that 8 to 12-year-old boy is especially going to love this. And the book that you wrote previously to this was in the Killing Seas one, that was all about the USS Indianapolis, about World War II.
Right.
And knowing that, what was the impetus or the seed that started to grow to write these books for boys, and for you, probably interested you to begin with?
Most people that know me would probably say that I'm stuck at that maturity level of the 8 to 12-year-old boy, so that would be some of it. I wrote the first series that I wrote was an action-adventure series called Spy Goddess, and it was a mystery thriller.
Right, I remember
and it taught me an important lesson. And you hear some writers say, I write the books that I like to read, and that's what I like to read is action-adventure, historical fiction, thrillers. And that doesn't mean that I 100 Years of Solitude is one of my favorite books. Can't all those things. I was a English minor in college, history major. So, but when it comes to pleasure reading, I think that boys are underserved, and if you give them a story that they can get engaged in and imagine themselves being in,
Sure.
it can really work. And the great thing about historical fiction is that it gives them, I've gotten so many letters from Into the Killing Seas, for example. This is too new to get letters yet.
Right, but you will.
But into the Killing Seas, it was letters from teachers, letters from students, letters from parents about how they became so engrossed in the story of the U.S. Indianapolis that they wanted to learn more about it. So they went out and they read nonfiction, and they read survivors' accounts, and they read. And so there's a thirst out there for books like this for boys, and I, to be perfectly honest, I get just as much fan mail and fan emails from girls.
From girls, yeah.
I got this for Into the Killing Seas. I got this incredibly passive-aggressive letter from a young girl about how she loved the book. I was her favorite author, but she was really, really mad at me for what I did to one of the characters, and it just kept switching back and forth.
Well, that's when when you're talking about a real historical event that was really extremely tragic. I guess you got to throw in some of that reality in there. But that's so great, because girls will go along. Girls will read more than boys. But that's so great that you're getting boys to then go on and read about the true accounts and survivor accounts and all that sort of thing.
That's what I hope, and I hope the same thing will happen with The Enemy Above.
I would think
there's so many fascinating true stories. The thing about writing about an event like World War II is that there are things that you can't make up that are better than any. I'm actually I've been invited to the Indianapolis Survivors Reunion in Indianapolis in July, and I've told them all that this book pales into to what they actually experienced and what they actually went through. There's no comparison.
Yeah.
So
But I think, when you're talking about 8 to 12-year-olds or boys reading this, I think fiction based on real historic events, just putting the emotion in it really fills in the gap, so you really get a feel for like what happened instead of just reading strict history.
Sure.
I think reading fiction based on true events
Sure.
really does that.
And I think it helps, it gives them the opportunity to imagine themselves in that situation, and how would they respond? Would they answer the call? Would they, if they were on a tiny raft surrounded by sharks, would they, what would their response be?
Sure.
And so far, it seems to have worked.
Yeah. So, The Enemy Above. So Anton is our kind of our hero here. He's only 12 years old. So and knowing that this is the Ukraine, this is the countryside, and this is World War II, and what the Nazis are doing to the Jewish population in the area, and happened all over many parts of Europe, is one of the most horrific things of our human history. But talk about him, and is he based on you a little bit, or anybody you put together for his DNA to create this character? Because authors have different answers sometimes when you talk about some of your main characters.
I don't know that that he's particularly based on me. I obviously any author that writes a hero in a book would like to think that that's me. But I just, the way the process works for me is I have this idea, and I actually discovered the true story behind The Enemy Above while I was researching into the Killing Seas. That happens a lot when I'll find I'm researching
but totally different places.
in totally different places.
Wow.
I'll say, wow, that sounds, and I'll make notes in my journal and then go back to it. But I think that every character has a little bit of the writer in him, and the relationship he has with his grandmother is very, very similar to the relationship I had with my grandmother. I mean, she meant the world to me, and if heaven forbid I were in a similar situation, I would like to think I would have done all the things that he did.
And she was a wonderful character, his Bubby.
Yeah, Bubby is quite a voice and
strength and courage.
And courage. And,
right.
All those things.
Right. No, she was absolutely wonderful. So the one thing I love about this book, and is the quote that you put in by Elie Wiesel at the beginning. I decided to devote my life to telling the story because I felt that having survived, I owe something to the dead, and anyone who does not remember betrays them again.
Yeah.
And I think that's so much of what this book is trying to tell us.
It is, and I believe that. Especially, I was talking with someone the other day about, for example, being invited to the survivors reunion. There are 11 men of the 317 who survived, who are still able to make the trip to Indianapolis. They hold the reunion every 2 years. Events like this, events like Pearl Harbor, the D-Day, eventually, probably within our lifetime, are going to be as far off sounding as Gettysburg and Valley Forge were to us when we were growing up. I mean, we're at the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor already. And World War II, the Weasel quote made me think about that. It made me think that if we don't tell these stories and we don't remember these stories, they'll be lost. And I just saw on the news the other day that one of the last 2 remaining Doolittle's raiders passed away.
I saw that too.
And here there's this, people don't know that story, that what an impact that had on World War II. And
we're losing that living connection.
We're losing it, and if those stories aren't told, then it's truly lost.
Well, yeah, and I think these things have to be told, and by writing fiction like you're doing with these events, I think kids, that empathy is so important. That's what they tell about reading fiction, and especially reading about these horrific events that took place, these dangerous, horrible events that took place. And World War II had its fill. That is for certain. So your evil character, the Gestapo Major Karl van Dusen, um, what a character.
Yeah.
But somebody,
yes.
I'm sure, did you pull him from anybody that really existed?
No, there are. He was sort of a compilation of a lot of different source materials.
Yeah.
There were. He was a very difficult villain to write in a way because he has virtually obviously no redeeming qualities whatsoever,
Yeah.
unless perhaps in some twisted way you would count determination as a quality, but trying to capture someone who was a true believer, a fanatic, but without making them a caricature. It was difficult. That one,
Yeah,
that
I
one took
bet.
a lot of polishing and a lot of
I
rewriting to
bet.
get it without making him seem like a cartoon
A
villain.
cartoon, right, right.
Because I wanted him to be real, and I wanted people to hate him
Right.
as much as I did at the end of the book.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Well, I think, yeah. I mean, how could there be anything else when you
Right.
think of these things that happen? Um, you know, your research, you must, and you mentioned a little bit this when you research for, Into the Killing Seas and finding this story by that research. But where did you go to your research? How did you research it? And any other surprising things that you learned in your research?
Well, it's very strange how much research leads me to other projects. It's happened to me before with picture books. It's happened
Yeah.
here. Actually, my next book that's coming after Enemy Above, same thing. Researching Into the Killing Seas, and my next book is called Prisoner of War, and it's about America's youngest POW in World War II,
Wow.
who was 15 and spent 4 years in a Japanese prison camp. But I discovered that story as I was looking at other material for other books. And the great thing about World War II is that it was there's so much material there. There you can see film, you can see video, you can see actual pictures of.
Right.
You can read first-person account. You can read after-action reports. Everything has been digitized and stored, and so it made the research process. When I was researching the Youngest Templar series, which was set in the Crusades,
Yeah, right.
that was a little bit harder.
Yeah, right. No, it's incredible how
That
much
world doesn't
yeah,
exist anymore,
No,
and you're reading
yeah.
translations, and you don't know
Sure.
how much the the translator
Yeah, I mean, it's
it-
what technology has done.
what
Yeah,
technology has done, and
has
this was
done, which is
and
incredible.
it was the first technological war, and so from a research standpoint, it was
Yeah,
a real
right,
valuable.
Right. So I'm wondering about some of the other characters and talking about Anton and his uncle, who is only just a few years older than he is, and is going on, and wondering about in this area of the Ukraine, what happened. I mean, Anton's father goes off to fight in the Polish army, and now his uncle, and those types of things. Did you research a lot about that, and where people in that part of the Ukraine ended up fighting against the
Right.
Nazis, but
Right.
also too even the research on hiding in the caves and
Right.
what Anton did,
Right.
and also his retaliation and some of the sabotage. And we don't want to give away any
Right.
spoilers about
Right.
what he does, because the book is full of such energy with this stuff.
The priest grotto, where the cave where they ultimately is still there,
Okay.
and it was actually the people living there. Someone wrote "The Germans are gone" on a gourd and rolled it down the entrance to the cave. That the Russian army had finally pushed them back and that they could come out. Some of the women and children had not seen the sun in over 500 days, and there's an anecdotal story that one of the little girls asked her mother to turn off the sun because it was so bright. Women and children weren't allowed out at night. The men would go out at night to forage for food and supplies. And then it was forgotten. It was just, they left, they went, many of them joined the Russian army, they went back to their farms, and then the cave was rediscovered by a caver in the 90s, and he went in
Wow.
down and found, and they just left. I mean, they left behind clothing, he found shoes. There are photos of all different types of artifacts that were left behind, And then he started asking around about this cave, and people remembered the story of it. But there were, it's a fractious area. There were sympathizers, there were collaborators, there were people who were loyal to the Russian army, there were people who wanted to fight but didn't want to fight for the Russian army. So like Anton's uncle joins a partisan militia who is basically standing up for the Jewish people and Jewish fight. If you read or saw the movie Defiant about the Bielski brothers in Poland, they took up arms and saved thousands of Jews during that period. And that's the thing. It's like I said, there's too many stories. There's stories that are more stories than can be told of not just a group like this, but of like I said, the Bielski brothers and Oskar Schindler, and even individuals who went off into the woods and survived for 3 or 4 years by themselves.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. The book that came out earlier in the year, Anna and the Swallow Man, is similar to that. Just wandering the countryside and living in the woods. So many people did that. Yeah. You've written so many historical books, from picture books all the way up, and even your adult books have a little bit of that, and books on Native American history, the Crusades, like you mentioned, World War II, Daniel Boone, Texas Rangers, Is there any particular part of history that you enjoy more, or does it just fascinate you just with most of it?
It all fascinates me. I tell people I was a history major in college and I never got over it. There's something about, there's been a few places that I've visited in my life where I just felt this feeling of I don't even know how to, it's like almost like I was standing on a hornet's nest, like I was the tingling of the sacristy at the Alamo, where the women and children were hidden as the battle happened. On top of Little Round Top at Gettysburg was another place where the Union, you can make an argument that the Union was saved at that spot. And then in the Picts in Westminster Abbey, where William the Conqueror was crowned King of England. I mean, you just get it's almost like an electric feeling in the air to me that I'm standing on the spot where William the Conqueror was crowned King of England in 1066. There's just something about it that I think the parts of it that can't be known are what. What was William the Conqueror thinking when, he was being crowned? What were those women? Those women and children in the Alamo could hear the battle raging outside their door. What were they thinking? What were they feeling? What were they experiencing at that moment? Joshua Chamberlain on Little Round Top is out of ammunition, and instead of retreating, orders his men to charge with the
Yeah, I mean, those places, it's so true, those historical places. So tell me, what do you remember as your first recollection of wanting to be a writer? Were you really young, and were you a writer, and wasn't historical stuff that you were writing about, those things that really interested you?
I wasn't young. I don't think I had a bolt of lightning moment.
Okay.
I think it was just something that I was always interested in, and when I went to college, being a history and English major, I got a lot of had to do a lot of writing, and actually got encouragement from professors that said that you have some talent at this and you should think about nurturing it. I was from a really small, tiny town in Michigan, and I didn't know what a writer did. I thought, what do I do? What's that mean? And then I think I got to a point in my life where I felt like I finally had something to say, and that made the difference.
So that first book you published, was it Blue Jacket? Was that your first? I remember that picture book, and I remember Rick Stark, as you know, was. I remember him showing that book to me, and I thought it was so incredible. Just wondering, how has the journey of publishing changed for you since you published that first book into now The Enemy Above? And have you seen the publishing industry change? Because you've worked in different capacities throughout the industry. But how has it changed, and how has the publishing process changed for you from that first book up till this one?
I think it's getting harder and harder to get published. I think publishers are much more choosy now
Okay.
about what they publish. I think the self-publishing revolution has made a big impact
Yeah.
on things. And I think also, there's a desire. Look, they run a business. They have to be profitable and make money.
Sure.
So they're much more choosy about what they think will be a commercial success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's changed. Not to say that 20 years ago publishers didn't want commercial successes. They did, but
Right.
with the rise of things like ebooks and things like that, it's changed dramatically. And I think the thought process has changed.
Yeah.
And I think it's tougher than
Right.
it was.
Right. So your experiences being on the other side of publishing, working for Harpercollins, or I know you work for Albert Whitman in different capacities. How have those experiences being on the other side of publishing informed your life as an author? And has it made you? Has it made it easier, or has it actually made it a little bit more difficult?
It's been a bit of a mixed blessing.
Okay.
On the one hand, you sort of know what to expect
Right.
going in.
Sure.
But on the other hand, I worked in sales and publicity marketing. I didn't have that author-writer relationship. That was completely new to me. And it was, when I say it was a blessing and a curse, it was a blessing because I sort of knew what I had to do to make a book as an author, to make a book, stand out. The curse part was you also know that how many books are published and how hard it is to get,
Yeah. Or
to
rise up to the top or
rise
get
up
attention.
and cut through the noise and
Sure.
and,
Sure.
Not that all these books are noise. They're not. They're
Yes.
great
Right.
books,
right.
but there's a lot of them.
Right,
And
right.
so that was having that no experience in that on the editorial side was a
Right.
real eye opener.
Yes, I bet. So, Mike, you've done so many different genres. It's not just historic, but you've done some sci-fi. You've done some, there's some magical, real. I mean, these different types of genres. Is there one you like to write more than others?
I like writing, and
Okay.
and it's the story comes to me, and as I said, the way it works for me is usually I'll have this idea for a plot, and I can't do anything until I get a character, and then the character has to tell me the story. And as over 20-some books, I've learned that characters are way smarter than I am, and they know what to do. And I get asked all the time, do you use an outline? Do you do this, do this? And I have what I call the umbrella outline, and I know where the story's going to start and where it's going to end. But then I let the character.
Oh, good. I like that
because,
answer.
what if I wrote a bad outline and then I'd end up with a.
Because you're sort of tied to it.
Right.
So you let it surprise you.
Right.
And excite you.
And that, like I said, the characters usually know. What they're doing.
So you don't set out. I mean, some authors, and I find this kind of interesting, that they'll say, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a YA novel. So the age level, but the story dictates what it's going to be, instead of the reverse.
Right. Yeah, I have a book that I'm working on now that's under submission, and I had an editor tell me, and it's actually a YA novel, and she read it and she said, I really like it, but you have to make the characters 12, and so it can be middle grade. And I said, there's just no way that this book can be middle grade. It's the topic, and I don't want to give away the story, but
no spoilers.
I just said there's just no way that they have to be older than that. 12-year-olds doing what these characters are doing in this book would just be ridiculous, frankly.
Right. So she gave up on it.
So she gave,
good.
She couldn't talk me into it.
Okay,
so,
good.
We'll see. What happens next, but there's I don't know. There's all these sort of rules about genres, and a character has to be a certain age to be middle grade and a certain age to be YA, and I don't know about that.
I don't think so.
I don't think it. I think it's the book. I think if To Kill a Mockingbird were published today, would it be a YA novel?
Probably not.
Would it be? What about books like Secret Life of Bees, where the protagonist is 12 or however old?
That's right.
Does that make it a YA? No, it doesn't. It's dealing with.
And kids always like to read about kids that are older than they are.
Sure, aspirational reading.
That's right.
And that was one of the things with. A perfect example was my Spygata series, where all the characters were in their teens, but all of my fan mail came from 10 and 12-year-old girls.
Exactly.
They wanted
and that was a sweet spot, I thought, for those books.
They want
that's
they want to read, and there was nothing in it that was controversial or anything that they had to worry about. It was just they were older.
So tell us okay, you mentioned a little bit working on a YA novel. Anything else that you have in the works?
I do. I have I hope to write a sequel to my adult novel Blood Riders, which I'm working on, but I keep getting kids' books, in the way. So, but and then I'm working on a couple of more World War II projects.
Okay. So will this be a series? Will it have a name, or is it just standalone novels?
No, I think they're standalone
novels.
Just,
that's good. That's good.
Novels of World War II.
Right.
I think.
Okay.
So.
Well, you really have. I think boys especially absolutely love this. I was just wondering, what do you hope kids will take away from this? Because they're talking about you're talking about the horrors of war, and you write about it, and what happens, but also the humanity that you put into these books too.
Right. I think it's one of the things that I try to bring out of it is the fact that war, the horrificness of it. I just made that word up, horrificness. It takes something so horrible to show not only the worst of us, but the best of us. You see a character like Major Von Dusen, which is an absolutely, evil human being. But then you see Anton and his grandmother and how she brings this community together and helps keep them alive. Right. And in To the Killing Seas, you had just tremendous acts of heroism by these men who had suffered this horrific tragedy and managed somehow to find something within themselves to survive it. And I think I want them to take away from it that these things, they're true. There were thousands of kids like Anton that experienced many of the same things. Right. And it's not a video game. It's not a television show. It's real. Right. It really, it may be fiction. It may be based on it, but it's a real thing. And in To the Killing Seas in particular, I remember talking at a school and telling a student, I said, you have to realize these weren't, it wasn't Tom Hanks and Brad Pitt that were fighting. These were 17, 18, 19-year-old boys that did this. They were barely out of high school, just off the farm, out of the streets of Brooklyn, and they went to the four corners of the globe and they saved the world. And they truly did. They saved. We're living in a world today because of what they did. They've been called the greatest generation, and it doesn't do them justice.
Right. Okay, so Mike, I end these interviews with a little quiz. It's sort of a lightning round. You know all the answers. They're all book related. So whatever comes to mind, really quick. What was your favorite book when you were a kid?
Robin Hood.
Okay, that explains a lot. How about something in high school or college that you read that has still stayed with you?
Cannery Row.
Okay. Okay, a book you've been an evangelist for that you could not tell enough people they had to read it.
Lonesome Dove.
You and my husband, both. Oh my gosh, he loves that book. He's read it several times. Okay. Have you ever faked reading a book? Because we all have.
I faked reading The Name of the Rose.
Okay. How about your favorite piece of historical fiction, since you write so much of that?
The Agony and the Ecstasy.
Okay, 100%, A+.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, Mike, thank you so much, and congratulations. Launch day for The Enemy Above.
Thank you.
Come back and see us when the next book come out.
Love to.
Great conversation with New York Times best-selling author Michael Spradlin about his new novel for kids. It's called The Enemy Above, a novel of World War II. Especially great for those boys 8 to 12 years old. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.